Hello, my fellow readers. It is I, Dark Symphony 777, with another fanfiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story. Finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. So, the story I am doing a review of is Pleasant Meadows by Keymaster. It is a Touhou fanfiction story. And it's actually, I wouldn't say it's a sequel. It's more of a spin-off to Being Mei-ling. For those of you who don't know, Being Mei-ling was a Touhou fanfiction I did a year or two ago. That centered around the adventures of one Hong Mei-ling. And I really, really loved that story. This story, the story's not good. It's yeah, I'm gonna be real. The story was not as good as the original. This one kind of, I guess, his biggest problem was it kind of showed the cracks of the author's writing style and why at the time, because the story was written 2013, a decade ago, and the author was still like, oh, he's experimenting with the story. So, what is the plot? Well, the plot for this story centers around Yukari. Anyone who knows Touhou knows that whenever Yukari is involved in something, you just gotta shake your head at the sky and yell at the moon, or perform Old Man Simpson, yell at clouds. God damn it, Yukari! So, what happens is, in this story, takes place at a little villa called Pleasant Meadows in the outside, i.e., Earth. So just basically, Gensokyo is a separate world where everyone lives, and the rest of the Earth is called the outside to them. And there is our character named Alfred. Where Alfred Arthur Westcastle, who's basically studying art and wants to own a boat and all that stuff. And he's basically working at this place called Pleasant Meadows in order to try and save enough money to be able to follow his dreams. So, what happens? Yukari Yukumo shows up, basically said, I have a bunch of friends, okay? I want to get them laid. Okay. Good? Good. Good. that's basically what Yukari's like. I'm getting laid. These are like other people's like, hey, I'm going to visit the outside world to get and hopefully find some suckers to have sex with you. Who wants to join me? No one? No one? Please? Everyone? They're male escorts? You mean strippers? Male escorts? You mean prostitutes? Fine, whatever you want to call them. They're here to entice you. But guess what? They don't show up at all. Instead, once all the Touhou characters come up, we get a lot of introspection. We're introduced to each character as a whole. So we got, off the top of my head, we have the maid character from the PC-98. No, not Yamame. That's a spider. Yumeko. There we go. We have Yumeko. We have Shikieki, who is the Yama of Gensokyo. We have Kasen Ibaraki, who's actually one of the sages of Gensokyo. The sages are the people who actually created Gensokyo, so it's kind of a big deal. It's at this point in time, we only know Kasen, Yukari, and Okino are the sages. I'm pretty sure there's probably at least one more. That's just me. Uh, we get Suika Ibuki. We get Hina Kageyama. She is important, not for the story, but for the last story. So we're not going to talk about her right yet. Hatate, Hatate, the Tengu, Iku Nagane, and Parsi Mizuhashi. And these are your characters. These are the people you're going to be calling with. And so the story actually is formatted very differently from being Meiling because of all the format and everything. So with being Meiling, that story was largely pretty much a sort of slice of life episodic sort of thing. So nothing really truly connected to each other. Everyone's like, here's like a little mini adventure starring Meiling having to deal with something. You pick what specific thing she's gonna be getting up to, and then every once in a while you just choose how she's gonna react to the situation. With this story, after you meet with everyone, because you actually have to meet with everyone before the story actually progresses, Yukari gets kidnapped. Basically, Yukari goes missing, and everyone suspects that she's been murdered. Spoiler alert, she wasn't, because it's Yukari. You're not going to kill someone like Yukari that easily. And we get a little horror-esque thing as everyone's traveling all across the mansion. And depending on which characters the people the people who did the anonymous votes for dictates who kind of survives how long, because the people who kind of get voted on the least or the least amount of attention, they're the ones getting kidnapped and everything. And that's more or less how the story kind of goes for like 90% of the story. Everyone, like, they kind of go somewhere, they do a thing. Everyone, Keymaster asks who you want him to talk to, depending on how the votes go, depending on not only how the story advances, but also who gets kidnapped. And then eventually reaches a point near the end where it takes a split path. So basically, at the end, there's the 5 girls left, which are Shiki, Parsi, Yumeko. Yes, Shiki, Parsi, Yumeko, Suika, and I think that's it. Not Carson. Oh, and Lyrica. I forgot about Lyrica. And all that. And you basically votes like, oh, root lock. Which actually causes a big flame war. To the point he kind of weirdly compromises by doing a split path. So basically, he kind of like he writes it in a way that everyone, like, both the last 2 paths, the route locks, which are spoiler alerts, the route locks are Shiki and Parsi lock, or the Parsi lock route. And they basically all kind of happen at the same time in like their own thing, and then they kind of combine together. And then everyone blames Yukari, and she's like completely like, no, but it wasn't me. I got some shenanigans as like everyone except for Alfred and the chosen girl, Shiki or Parsi, depending on if you read depending on which route it was. They kind of work together. They kind of team up and go against the main bad guy. I'm not gonna spoil that who the bad guy is. And after they deal with the bad guy, something happens that kind of causes Alfred to kind of have to go to Gensokyo. So basically, if in the Shiki route, he actually straight up dies, and Shiki has to kind of pull some strings with the Celestial Bureaucracy because, like, I want you to work for me and stuff like that. With Parsi route, he kind of gets corrupted and turned into a yokai because of what happens after they fight the bad guy. But in the end, they all kind of live pseudo forever. Well, it's kind of weird. This is admittedly like the weakest story of the trilogy. There's Being Mailing, there's Pleasant Meadows, and there's Tengu Misfortune. Tengu Misfortune is going to be the other story, and it's the one that kind of have to hold Hina about. So I'm not going to talk about her here. I'm going to talk about Hina once I review Tengu Misfortune. I think the plot is as good as you can really get, because that's kind of like the thing with like these super serious, your vote actually matters, not only for what happens afterwards, but what a cause and effect style story. It's really, really hard to rate. And the only reason I'm reviewing Pleasant Meadows is because this story needs to exist in order to set up the events of Tengu and Misfortune, because everything involving the overall plot of Tango's Misfortune kind of ties into this story, or more specifically involving Hina. So I can't review one without reviewing this one. But I will say, I think it's as good as he can. There is the ever present problem of these types of create your own adventure stories, because if you're trying, it's one thing when you're doing something episodic, because you can easily adapt anything you want to kind of fit the situation, which is why I like Being Mailing so much, because it's a very simplistic. It still has a lot of fun and love. And I had to actually read that to read this. And I still love Being Mailing. You still had to have a little fun and had a lot of jokes and all that. But again, there wasn't a lot in terms of interconnectivity. It's just a bunch of mini stories that are just connected by the fact that Mei Ling's the main character. Well, this story, every choice you make matters over the rest of the story, over the entirety of the rest of the story. Everything that's chosen has a domino effect, and I'm not a big fan of those in create your own adventure stories, because of how hard they are to implement. Because hey, you can cause shenanigans. You can also cause stuff like this, and this is gonna happen. You're actually gonna see it when I talk about Tengu Misfortune. You might cause entire discussions to derail. You might have to play it safe. You might inadvertently start messing yourself up, because they pick something that you never really expect to pick, and you have to plan everything. It's it's a big mess, and everything's. I swear to God, everything's going to become exasperated in Tango Misfortune. That story is a can of worms. I'm going to say, but Pleasant Meadows, I think, is is average. I can't really. There's not really much to say in terms of the plot, because it's just a very, very weak horror mystery. It tries to be scary, but it doesn't really do a good job of it. It tries to be a good mystery, but it's too. Problem is, the story is way too short to matter. Uh, when it comes to characters, Alfred's a good character. He's very snarky. I will say he's uninteresting. He's definitely the weakest of the protagonists between Mei-Ling, him, and Aya in Tango Misfortune. Spoiler: Aya Shinamara is going to be the main character in Tango in the third story. He is very much a leg man. Like, don't make it a fetish, but he's like, I like them legs. Their legs. Shigeki, bend over. Them legs. But he's very snarky. He has that very dry sense of humor that a lot of British people have. He's very entertaining, but it's just compared to Mei Ling, and especially Aya, he's kind of like the odd one out in the fact he doesn't really have a lot of depth to him. Yeah, the author tries their best to try to kind of like give him some backstory, but it's not really a lot, because instead of that, people just want to keep seeing him snark. Yeah, that's pretty much just the best way I could say about it. is just they just rather see him snark and kind of be like crack jokes and stuff like that. So we don't really get a lot of depth into him. We got just enough that you kind of like that you do appreciate what he's bringing to the table, especially again in comparison to Mei Ling and Aya. But he's definitely the weakest of the three. He's rather one note, I would say. The rest of the characters, I mean, Parsi and Shiki, they're fine. They're pretty much the most developed characters out of all of them. Again, this is kind of a consequence of everyone kind of like having to vote. And these two kind of got more screen time than the rest of them because of how the story was chosen by the people who read the story. But Parsi being like a very jealous person because it's actually she's a yokai that was based on jealousy. Basically, she got married, and then she found out her husband was cheating on her with someone, and she was so embroiled with jealousy that she basically murdered them both, and that caused her to actually turn into a yokai. So that's why her whole thing is that she's just very jealous of everyone, and then she kind of deeply regrets everything because it happened so long ago, and she kind of like burned herself out, and all she has left is just her ability to create jealousy and all that. Shikieki is a very straight laced character. She's probably my favorite character in the story. Um, a neat little touch with Shiki is the simple fact that, despite the fact, thanks to one of the common mangas of Touhou, where the author kind of depicted her as like a very a little kid like character. A lot of people think that she's actually like a kid. Well, in terms of body form, but no, she's actually very tall. And this story kind of plays with like does the more adult looking Shiki that is actually supposed to be the canon version of Shiki. I don't blame Zun for that. I blame the person who wrote the manga because they're the ones who want to have a little fun and turn her into make her look like a kid, and that kind of caught on. But I like Shiki. She's very straight laced. She's very tight. She understands that people don't like her lectures because that's kind of like Shiki's whole thing. She lectures people a lot. In fact, in Phasmagoria, like the whole reason for the boss fight against Shiki is because she starts lecturing the character, whoever you're playing as, and they just want to shut her up. So he basically just beat the shit out of her just to get her to stop talking. But the story also plays with that aspect and the fact that she kind of realizes that that's what she's used to. She's used to like having the lecture because she's so used to Komachi being like a lazy bum and kind of that she's kind of having the dog pile. She doesn't really know. She's kind of always on, so to speak. So she's like a workaholic, and the lecturing is kind of like that inability to turn off. And in her epilogue, we kind of see her actually kind of starting to turn off. Like she's still having the I'm always on thing, but they're like thanks to Alfred, she's like it's like no, we're going to the bar. It's like no, I got to sign this paperwork. Paperwork will be here tomorrow. Ah! And all that, but I do like Shiki. She's a very well thought out character. I like her better than Parsi. I like her better. She's like I said, best character in the entire story. Grammar errors. There are a lot of grammar errors. Trust me when I say this kind of makes a lot of sense because this story does have a lot of very clever wordplay, so it kind of makes sense why there'd be a lot of grammar errors. But yeah, I don't really pacing is a create your own adventure story. Pacing gonna be based on what the people who vote are gonna it's gonna be paced off. It is very short. Let me go down here. For clarity's sake, this is 7 threads. B mailing is 10 threads, and Tengu Misfortune is 20 threads. So, in terms of which story is like long and short, this is the shortest story of them all. And well, I don't really have much the way of saying this. Again, just like with the grammar, a lot of pacing is also very dictated by clever wordplay and all that. Makes sense with Alfred being very snarky and stuff like that. Would I recommend this story? Uh, I think so. I think, like I said, Pleasant Meadows is the weakest of the trilogy, but it's not. It's by no means a bad story. I just this is just it's just what's the word? It's just there now I realize it's something I really would not want to read again because the only reason I read this is because you need this in order to understand this. You know, understand this story. Read this as well as being melee. You got to read. You actually have to read both. And like I said, Tango Misfortune is its own can of worms. I'm not even done with that story yet as of this recording. I'm probably gonna finish it by after Christmas or something like that. But yeah, Pleasant Meadows. I think it's all right. If I had to say what my best part was, obviously I already mentioned it earlier. Shiki, well, really well done character. I really like this author, Shiki. Uh yeah, that's Pleasant Meadows. There isn't much to say about it because this is just supposed to be a prelude to something much, much bigger. But I'll talk about that bigger part when I get to that bigger part. But yeah, this has been Dark Symphony 777 and cut.